Good evening. I call this meeting to order at 6:19 p.m. Tonight we have present directors Tytler, After, DeFreitas, and myself, meaning we have a quorum. Thank you to our interpreter Astrid. Would you please share the interpretation instructions with our participants, and then we can turn on the interpretation function. Thank you. The first business in order is the approval of the agenda. Directors, are there any proposed changes to the agenda? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. Motion passes. Our next agenda item is our opening celebrations and updates by our superintendent, Dr. Anna Cole.
Good evening. It's nice to have folks here, so thank you for being here. A couple updates this week or this last 2 weeks. So first, I want to start with health insurance. Folks are aware that we are in the middle of phase 1 decision making to try to address some of the concerns we've had about our current health insurance. Want to update the board and community that our certified, classified, and administrative interest-based bargaining teams have been working really hard over the last 2 weeks to do a couple things. One, to launch their work for this year, the regular interest-based bargaining work that needs to happen in the 24-25 school year, and develop interests that we're going to work on. And they are also leaning in to listen and learn and clarify employee understanding of the current issues around health insurance. So we are incredibly grateful for all of our IBD teams' thoughtful engagement and leadership, their collaboration around this work, and their commitment to representative leadership to make sure that employee voice is well represented in the decisions that we make. As I've mentioned and continue, this work has been incredibly frustrating as it is taking valuable staff time away from our core work of supporting our students. I would say that a silver lining of the work is that it's shedding a great deal of light on our internal systems and structures that are related to strategic priority number 3, operational excellence. So we will continue to lean in to find reasonable, rational solutions that are communicated transparently and keep staff well-being at the forefront of this work, because we know that when our teachers and our staff feel safe, supported, and stable, they create better learning environments for our kids. So looking for more updates on that at our next board meeting, where we'll make a recommendation to the board on what to do about our current partnerships or providers for health insurance. Want to congratulate Roaring Fork High School, Lemon Springs High Schools, who pulled off really fun homecoming weeks last week. So big thanks to the student leaders, our student athletes, and all the faculty, staff, and parents who supported students and their activities last week. One of the gifts of having all of our small schools is that the entire community really shows up to celebrate students and create opportunities for them to play and come together. Next week, homecoming will come to Longhorn Country, and we know the whole town of Basalt will show up to support students and student athletes. And we're hoping that they'll have a really fun and safe and spirited homecoming next week. We celebrated last Friday, Colorado Proud Day in our nutritional services, and our food services department received $20,000 in a local food program grant from the Colorado Department of Education to increase our use throughout the year of Colorado grown ingredients in school meals. We highlighted our local producers last Friday with Colorado Proud Day in all our school cafeterias, where garden burgers, home fries, salad, and a blackberry crisp, all made from scratch with fresh, locally sourced ingredients from Colorado farms, were served. There were over 27,000 free breakfasts and 44,000 free lunches in September. And want to give a special shout out to our nutritional services team and Sandra Ponce, the new nutritional services operations manager, who has jumped right in this year and is doing a phenomenal job supporting the team and the work while Octavio Maese is out. Also want to share some appreciation for Megan Capelli and our staff housing property management team from Preferred Property Management. Megan and her team have gone above and beyond in their response to some last-minute delays in getting our certificate of occupancy at Meadowood last weekend. Megan worked through the weekend to ensure that every tenant had a place to stay when we had a delay for our move-in time, and was able to store their belongings until units were ready. Also want to update the board and remind staff and families that there are a lot of surveys that are out right now. Our calendar survey is open for student, staff, and families. It's due tomorrow, closes tomorrow. It has received a lot of responses, and the calendar committee is going to work over the next month to review the data and feedback, and then draft calendars for the board to consider for first read at our November 20th special meeting. Additionally, the staff talent and culture survey is out. This is a new survey, and it is pretty robust. It takes about a good 20 minutes. And it launches our organizational equity audit. So this is a survey that was created by Promise 54, an independent organization that's leading our equity audit. It focuses on policy. The equity audit, as you remember, focuses on policy, resource allocation, and staff recruitment and retention, all aligned to our 24-29 strategic plan. The talent and culture survey will form the basis for the staff recruitment and retention assessment that Promise 54 is conducting and the development of a plan. And if you remember that this is all aligned to strategic priority number 5, thriving team, which focuses on ensuring that we recruit and retain staff who reflect the diversity of our students and community. Promise 54 is also moving into the talent and culture surveys happening, as well as a series of focus groups and one-on-one interviews with staff. Finally, really excited that there's one more week of having the first ever classified interest-based bargaining survey has been released by the classified IBD leadership team this year to gather interest and priorities for the team's work. So we are delighted to have this collaborative bargaining process formally launched, and we're really grateful for the classified IBD leadership team that has really jumped in with no experience and has done a ton of training and a ton of work together to get these pieces in place. And last update, our attendance specialists, front office teams, and district data team are wrapping up October count. So this is a season that is critically important for establishing enrollment numbers, which then tie directly to our finances. So we're grateful for the big lift of these teams and for the families continuing to stay engaged and aligned with our 95% or above attendance rate goals.
Thank you. The next business in order is the Healthy Kids Colorado survey presentation from Dr. Cole.
Instructors, good evening. We're going to present on the Healthy Kids Colorado survey. So we can click the pens. So the Healthy Kids Colorado survey is a comprehensive survey that is administered by the state. It's been since 2015, and it's really just a check in on the health and well-being of young people. The purpose, it's gathering data with the purpose specifically about what factors support youth to make healthy choices. And so this information helps to inform how kids are feeling, what we can do to support them. The students and parents in schools, community organizations, local public health agencies, and state agencies do use this data in a couple of ways. So one is to provide a needs assessment and progress monitoring as schools and communities address mental health issues, address health issues, including mental health. It informs programming to support student health and academic success. It informs how to increase students' sense of well-being and sense of belonging, and it also is used to track long-term health outcomes. The Colorado Department of Public Health does contract with the school and youth survey team at the Colorado School of Public Health to administer the survey. And so a little bit about the completion and the topics. The topics themselves include the protective factors, asking about their feelings of having trusted adults, belonging and family involvement. There's questions about health behaviors, how much kids know about it, how much they practice it, how many students believe that others practice it, and that includes substance use, sexual health and safety and violence. And then the social emotional indicators as a third category asks questions about feelings of depression, suicide, and bullying. All 10 of these schools listed have participated. So in total, we had 1,530 high schoolers complete the survey, and that's 77% of our total high school student population, and 1,117 middle schoolers complete the survey, and that's 73.2% of our total middle school population who did complete the survey. The window to administer the survey was October 30th, 2023 through November 13th, 2023. As Dr. Cole was mentioning, this work is really tightly aligned to our First Through Eighth initiative, which is students first. This helps us identify where we are meeting the mark and where we're not, especially when we're looking at our individual student populations and our subgroups to see where beyond just a feeling of belonging, but what other factors and protective factors we see present and what we don't. This really does help us also have another data point aside from the panorama survey, for example, or other informal surveys to really understand on specific targeted questions on how kids are doing. I think a key thing to remember is we don't just gather the data just for the sake of it and to give it to someone else when we actually do know your target purpose. You know, students are feeling connected and they're feeling seen and feeling recognized and valued. They're less likely to engage in risky behavior. And it's not just limited to when we think about substances and things like that. We're thinking about relationships, friendships, what they believe is safe. And so when students are able to feel more safe and engage in less risky behaviors, we believe that they can attend to better academic achievement, having higher grades, test scores, come to school more often, and have a better schooling experience. The practical is going to talk a little bit about a summary of our results.
There's a lot of questions on this. The survey itself will open up different questions based on how kids respond. So it can be upwards of like 200 questions depending on how kids engage with the survey. So it's incredibly robust. There's a lot of layers to it. It is provided to us in a disaggregated data set in many different ways. So there's a lot of ways to look at it. And I would probably frame a lot of the questions for tonight of like, we can dive deeper and we do because there's a lot here. But we wanted to pull out some trends from some of our snapshots, some state comparisons. I can talk a little bit about the disaggregated components we're looking at. There's a lot more to this. That we can look at with a lot of teams in a lot of different ways. And so when we first pull out the middle school data, one of the things, of course, that we're really interested in because of our theories of action around, you know, kids who feel safe and connected in school are going to be ready to learn. We're going to better be able to hit those student achievement and growth goals. So school connectedness, school belonging is really important to us. And you can see that our middle schools, we outperform the state a little bit in terms of feeling a sense of belonging. And I would say but the data shows that there's only about a 3% difference in school belonging between white and Latino students. So our white students reported positively indicators around belonging at about 72% versus 70% of Latino students feeling belonging in middle school. Some interesting trends that I think we're seeing in terms of alcohol, you know, like, and we pulled out things that felt that we were significantly different than the state or had a significant disparate outcomes with our students. So we're not talking about everything this evening, but just things that kind of felt interesting and that we're starting to look and dig deeper into. Alcohol usage is one of those things that middle schoolers here in our district are higher. The kind of the combined data around alcohol use is higher than the state averages by about 5% in middle school, and we don't see any differences between our white and Latino students in terms of the alcohol use. Interesting. Trying to make sure my notes are tracking. Mental health there's a number of questions. There's a lot to Healthy Kids that asks about mental health and supportive relationships. And, you know, we tend to be somewhere close to state averages on this. I think what's really interesting for us and concerning for us at the middle school level is that in almost every indicator around mental health and suicidality, our Latino students, middle school students are almost like reporting 2 times the risk of our white students around mental health in middle school. So for example, kind of when we look at depression indicators, about 30% of our Latinx students are reporting that they felt so sad or hopeless for 2 or more weeks per school year, or 2 or more weeks that they couldn't participate in regular activities. About 30% of our Latinx students are reporting that and about 15% of our white students. So there's some concerning trends about middle school mental health, and especially for our Latinx students that we're trying to look into more and do more root cause analyses with our teams. One of the things that that I think we then look at is like, our services there and our kids getting access to them. And the Roaring Fork Schools has had a strong commitment and partnership with the Aspen Hope Center to make sure that there's mental health providers in every school. And I will name that in the most recent annual report from the Aspen Hope Center, looking at their data of their work in Roaring Fork school districts, they are serving our Latino student population at a higher rate in terms of participation than our white students. And so I think that that's, for us, that feels reassuring when we see this kind of data, that it looks like there's more need for mental health support of our Latinx students, to also then see that those students are being served more frequently by our school-based mental health providers. Does that make sense? So that is reassuring to know that the supports are there and kids have access. It's still not enough. It's working. Oh, there we go. Great, let's talk about high school. So again, at the high school, we start with the student belonging, and we see here, in terms of students belonging, again, we're just slightly above the state, but we'll look at disaggregated data. Our Latino students are reporting sense of belonging about 5 percentage points lower than our white students at the high school level. Although, when we look at this question about, do you enjoy your time at school, our Latino students report enjoying school more by about 8 percentage points than our white students. So some interesting things to look at there in terms of kids enjoying their time in high school and sense of belonging. When we look at alcohol use, we pulled that out with middle schools, and we see this too, that our kids tend to be using more than using alcohol more than students across the state in most indicators. And as you can see here, what I think is interesting is that we often see the student perception data. So students that think it's wrong to be drinking alcohol, we are lower than the state. And so because less kids think it's wrong, we're seeing more usage of them when we think about that. I would say when we really tease in and look at some of the disaggregated data around high school usage of alcohol, we tend to see behaviors like binge drinking much more common amongst our white students, by about a 2-to-1 or more than a 2-to-1 than our Latino students. So there's some interesting trends when we really disaggregate the data to target in on what student populations are demonstrating more behaviors. When we look at mental health in our high schools, we see similar trends, though not as pronounced as we see at the middle school. So depression indicators, when we disaggregate for our Hispanic Latinx students, we see about 33% of our Hispanic Latinx high school students reporting the kind of signs of depression, as compared to about 22% of our high school white students. And when it comes to suicidality measures at the high school level, there is no difference between white and Latino students. So I would say when we think about kind of the trend reports and some big ideas here, some bright spots of other components in the data that we see, and we also get trend. So we get trend reports on our high school data, which demonstrate from 2015 to the odd years that we've been doing the Healthy Kids Colorado survey. They will look at identify trends that are statistically significant. So enough to report that, like, hey, as a region, you're trending in this direction. So some bright spots is that we see bullying statistically significantly decreasing across all indicators. And those are like where bullying happens, online, in school. So that's a bright spot. We are also seeing statistically significant decrease in tobacco use across all indicators, including students increasing awareness of the risks of first and secondhand smoke. So those are some bright spots that we're seeing in terms of trends. I think some challenges that we're seeing is an increase of marijuana use, specifically through vaping and edibles. So we're really seeing trends around edibles increasing. And then I think another challenge that we see that I think wasn't on anybody's radar, but there are pretty significant drops in our students' engagement with volunteerism and community service. So I think that's another interesting one that I think we will be grappling with our partners, because we know that kids also feel connected to their communities and feel a sense of purpose. are going to show up differently at school. So we're also looking into that one as well. I think a complicated and interesting component of the trend reports is that from 2021 to 2023, we're really relieved a little bit to see some significant overall decreases in depression risk for our students. So a pretty significant drop in depression and suicidality from the last 3 years. So kind of coming out of the pandemic to 2 years ago. That feels like a bright spot, but overall, our trends since 2015 for all indicators around mental health show that we're increasing risk, despite this fact that we had kind of a drop off from 21 to 23. So definitely keeping an eye on those components. So as I mentioned, there's a lot to this data, and we will continue to work with it through teams. So our school leadership and our student support teams at schools, our school counselors and mental health providers, deans of culture will be, they also look at their data because they can pull it just for their school and look at details and trends for their school. Our Roaring Fork School District's district wellness committee that our parents and community members attend will be working with the data as well. It's always been really helpful for us to have other eyes on it, and that district wellness committee is well poised to give us more of a parent perspective of the data. So those teams will be working with district additional data. And then our district student services team really did a first dive at their last URW. Executive director of schools, Joel Hathaway, led the team in a data analysis to take an initial look at some of the trends. And as Assistant Superintendent Park pointed out, this work is really important because it aligns directly to strategic priority number 1. Students first, and making sure that our students, that student well-being and belonging is right at the center of our work. So happy to take questions.
Yeah, so we'll now go around and give 2 minutes for each board member to ask questions or make comments, and we'll start with Director DeVries.
Thanks for the update, and I, as always, appreciate the school putting the time and resources into engaging with such a thorough survey. I know that it's very impactful, especially at the building level. I just had a couple of questions. You may or may not know the answers to some of these. Have we seen any strong correlation, knowing that the Mountain West struggles significantly with alcohol use and depression and suicidality at the adult level? Have you done any alignment of those numbers? Are they reflective of what we're seeing in youth or predictive in any way? Or?
You know, we haven't done that analysis, so I know that there are CDPHE often pulls this data to look at those kinds of trends. And it's our district data is not accessible online per se, but our regions is, and so we can pull this with our region, and it is used in other analyses, but none of that can be directly used. But it is there. I mean, I would hypothesize that there are some connections there.
Yeah, and I'm interested just because we as a district continue to seek support from communities in maintaining mental health resources in our schools, and whether it's with counties or local municipalities. And I wonder if there's a story to be told between those two pieces of data that might, impact the larger community conversation more. I was going to also ask if you saw. Well, I guess I'll just know that. Well, what else is it that we're doing to strengthen our relationship with, say, the Aspen Hope Center or other mental health resources? I think I've talked about some, but they might want to do in the short term.
We are certainly foreseeing instability in our funding for the school-based mental health providers. A lot of our towns are not seeing so we pay for a school-based mental health provider in every school through London. City of Lone Springs, Town of Carbondale, Town of Salt, and Bill County all contribute to our ability to do this. We have a Colorado Department of Education grant, the School Health Professionals Grant is funding some positions in our elementary schools. We will lose that grant in a year and a half. City of Lone Springs is cutting their funding in their 2025 budget. Marijuana tax revenue is going down in Carbondale and Salt. And so those are concerning trends that we're looking at, especially looking at this data and knowing the use of our students and feeling like we have a really valuable model. So I would name first that we're very concerned about the future of that program, especially when we look at data like this. And then especially when we look at the Hope Center data of touch points and feel like, wow, kids who need this are getting access, which feels really good. But we don't stop there. So, I mean, we've invested, and the board's aware of this, in teams and culture that really work on kind of tier 1 supports in school culture and climate for all of our students. We work with partnerships with pathfinders, other sorts of social emotional well-being groups and team partners in the valley. We also are trying to remain responsive and dynamic to the needs of our student population. So I think I reported at one of our updates this year, GSES and GSHS, which have seen the largest populations of newly immigrated students, are implementing a new evidence-based social, emotional, and mental health well-being program called STRONG, that is a kind of group work for newly immigrated students and their families. And so we're partnering between our school counselors, our school-based mental health providers, and really led by the Family Resource Center to adopt those programs to really support the specific needs of newly immigrated kids. So we remain, we try to remain dynamic in this work, and also paying attention to the really, I think, structural things like school-based mental health that really matter. And I think we're going to have on board in the coming months about how to sustain those programs that kind of create the backbone of our schools.
Yeah, I think it's being handled with all of the resources that we have available to us in the school district right now. And it's more than a school district problem. It's a community conversation. It should be a community lived, and the organizations which are interested in the data that we've discovered through this process need to be the ones showing up to join that work as well. So thank you for your effort.
Thank you. Director Tyler?
Thank you for sharing this information with us. It's very informative. The part that really stuck out to me, and I realized that as a district, we're very similar to where we are as a state level, so we're not an anomaly with this data, but I was really shocked by the part that talked about attempted suicide in the last year, and that like 7% of the students, or like 1 in 14 students in the last year have attempted suicide. And to me, that was like, wow. And I guess my question is, what kind of things are we putting in place as a district to work with that and to make that a priority and to focus on it?
We really share your concern, your response to that, and the fact that there's been kind of the depression data go down, but not that suicidality, and that 7 to 12% of our students we're not seeing significant disaggregated like subgroup trends, except I would name our gender expansive, non-conforming LGBTQ plus identifying kids tend to have higher rates of suicide. Like that's the one group that tends to, when we look at disaggregated data, tends to be higher at risk. And so I would say a lot of the things that we've been doing are around outreach and education, are around frankly like response systems. And so we have a very refined now partnership and contract with the Aspen Hope Center to provide crisis support for students. We provide training for staff and teachers to recognize signs of suicide. We train folks in every building to know there's some kind of core screener questions that we ask, and we make sure that if teachers don't feel comfortable asking them, they know how to keep kids in line of sight, and there's somebody who can do that screening. And then we have some really robust protocols with the Aspen Hope Center to bring their crisis crew on site to do suicide screenings with kids and build safety plans. And so it still feels that if we're in, like, I feel like the responsive components are strong in place. I don't know that we found the kind of proactive, the real leverage points on proactive education or prevention that tackles that number. And I don't know that, around the state that we're quite nailing that. I think this problem feels bigger than us. It feels like we've done a lot to have safety pieces in place when we know, but it's really hard when we don't.
Is there any type of like this district assigned lessons that were given to crew teachers to give during crew, or something that could maybe be that preventative piece or something that we're implementing to try to like ongoing regular basis, like what can we do before it gets there?
I would say, I think the work to try to monitor, just can everyone name a trusted adult? Can everyone name someone they can talk to through the families and stuff? I think it's creating some predictability in the school, the relationships piece of that is necessary for everyone, and so I think there's a piece, right, that might be like, how you recognize your feelings, can you articulate them, and so there's a lot of that still work in our schools, the various programs to help identify the emotion, be able to talk about it, be able to express it, because those are those practical things. All the stuff with the screener, if students have something concerning, like those are all really active, and we have some robust policies there. But the data at the top of that, if you have an adult to go to for help with a serious problem, or if you ask for guardian for help, 71.8% is not high, right? Or the 80%, which is at the top of that slide, primarily in the high school. And so the value and intention for the school culture and climate that our deans, for example, work on very closely with their teams and leaders. The kinds of conversations that teachers have with their students to build relationships is really the space that they open up and the comfort that the schools themselves have for kids to come when they have an issue are all for.
So if we say there's like, and I might not get the numbers exactly, but 70% have that severe adult or 80% have that. Have we done any studies that say of this 7% that have attempted suicide in the last year? Do we know what percent, like, are they coming from that 20 or 30% that don't have that trusted adult, or are they dispersed equally amongst that population? Do we have any data that shows like who those students are?
We're asking if we have individual level data to track whether a student who marked, yes, I have a trusted adult, and yes or no, whatever the answer to the question is attempted.
Yes.
We don't, Healthy Kids Colorado is anonymous, which is,
Oh,
I
there we
mean,
go.
it's wonderful because of the robustness of the data. It is not like, it's not the kind of thing we can say, great, let's pay, can share these and this information with follow up. And I will name that a number of our schools, and one of our gaps in terms of social emotional learning and best practices is around screeners. And more robust social emotional screeners for kids that are tied to the students, and we are piloting SEL screeners in a bunch of our schools. And looking at those pilots as ways to do more holistic, comprehensive, and tied to students, screeners, around their social emotional well-being that could then lead us to action.
And we feel like when we do give these screeners or the students answering in a way that they're like saying, I need help when it's like being asked, do you know that?
Yeah, I mean, that's really part of it, and part of what, and it's also part of it, I would say another thing that often works for us is safety help. Like our kids who, I would say that our student body is pretty well aware of their friends and their friends' well-being, and it's not great. Kids who safe to tell let us know. And so we get a lot of concerns through safety help for suicidality. I will say the biggest thing that our school leaders worry about is the kids who aren't talking about it, who wouldn't respond on a survey, wouldn't respond on a screener, that this is a concern to them. The friends don't know. And that's a piece that's just hard. Thank
you, Director After.
Great, thanks. You mentioned that there's a ton of data for these 200 question surveys. How can we see some of like disaggregated data?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly mention. It's a massive, piece of it. You can get lost in it for a while. It's hundreds of pages, but it's fascinating. The trend reports come in late for us, which is frustrating, and it's why, assistant superintendent told you in the window, we really done that data like 3 weeks ago. And that is very helpful analysis for us. The raw data we got this summer, and that's what's some of it is screened, of course, for the kind under 6, and the kind of N is lower than 16, we won't get that. That's our smaller schools, it's hard to see that, some of the data.
And then do we have disaggregated data on the level of our participation in extracurricular activities? Like those are really a driver of the belonging. But, progress, can we look at who's actually doing something?
We do, there's a pretty robust section in Healthy Kids about participating in sports, and clubs and activities at school, sport activities outside of school. There's quite a few sections that are disaggregated in Healthy Kids, and this won't come immediately to mind, but because we were working on strategic plan pieces today, that disaggregated data of student participation in extracurriculars and sports is one of our monitoring metrics for community priority #1. So when our strategic plan data dashboard goes live, that will be data that's more readily accessible to stakeholders and community members to see the live kind of updates live as much as every 2 years. This data from Healthy Kids, but that's where we track that disaggregated participation.
And I know extracurriculars and sports and non-sport activities aren't always the rate that of school leaders. So how do you, when you share those data with school leaders, how do you think about or talk about potentially driving kids toward extracurriculars and other activities? Knowing that is that a conversation that you all have?
It is, and to be honest, it's when in under strategic priority #1, students first, we really named student representation in clubs and activities as a priority initiative that we want to make sure that our students, the participating students in sports and clubs and activities and student leadership reflects the diversity of our kids in our schools. And so for this year, the initiative kind of the work under that strategic plan has fallen to Joel Hathaway, Executive Director of Schools, and the Dean of Culture teams. And what they are working on around that is first for this year, raising awareness and then building student capacity to raise awareness with students and staff. Just to start questioning who is on student council. How does student council appropriately or not appropriately reflect the diversity of our school? And so what Joel and the deans are working on right now, they're actually working with students to create a survey that would look at more robustly at participation and what kind of activities we participate in and why not, and what we should have. So that we can start by raising awareness and starting to better monitor school to school what that engagement looks like. And then try to build capacity with student leadership teams to start pushing on what are we missing, what do we need, right? We were at Riverview School this week and heard middle schoolers say, we need more soccer, we want flag football. And hearing that from those students of color. So I think there's a piece too of how do we then support our school leadership, whether it's the principals or the deans, support them financially, structurally, systemically to create a place that people want to be in.
Just a few more questions. Is the survey in English and Spanish or for Spanish and Spanish? Is it in any other languages?
And what's English and Spanish?
What are the results telling you about, I assume there are questions about social media on the survey. Any insights from there? Are students still engaging with the toxic?
The survey double asked questions about online bullying. It asked about like screen time. But I don't have any of that data in my head, but it definitely is you could go down the rabbit hole of that question with this data.
And then my last question for this is, why do you think bullying is decreasing? What do you agree with that?
You know, it was really, again, nice to see that statistically significant, because I think qualitatively we hear plenty that it's not decreasing. The board is about to tackle in the next couple of weeks in bullying policies. I would like to think that our investments around school culture and climate, some of the have a curriculum that I think has been settled in now for 5 to 7 years in our elementary and middle school, the second step, that has a lot of anti-bullying curriculum that people are more comfortable and familiar with. I would like to think that there's that relationship, but I don't know that we're sure yet. And frankly, like, it's nice to see the trend decreasing, but the fact that it still exists is not okay.
Thank you. I just have a couple more questions. Are there questions on other drug usage? So can you give us some general information about responses on harder drugs specifically?
We tend to be about on average of with the state, with our, like, other drug usage, and some, you know, nothing that really stood out to us other than the increase in like marijuana edibles and vaping, and the decreases in tobacco and an increase in alcohol. And everything else felt about on our, not that that's okay, that we're about the same as the state, but I think that we were really pulling out the things where it felt like, oh, we might be on here for outperforming the state in not great ways.
Okay, and then is it broken down by school or by community? Because we cross 3 communities, and I saw the data when it came out further up Valley, and it wasn't on par with the state, it was higher than state averages, and so specifically since I represent the SALT, I'm curious if the data coming out of the SALT more closely aligns with the data that I saw come out of the other Valley not too long ago.
That's a good question, and I don't know the nuances of the community-based data yet. We've really, at least at our level, looked at the like district pools. But our school teams are looking at that for sure, to see if there are kind of those trends within our high schools. And that is, I mean, that's how we can receive it at a school level, we can receive it at the district level. We have asked some of the work that has been done. Carbondale has a lot of middle schools, and with some of the work that the Carbondale Youth and Family Advisory Council did over the last couple of years, and we were a big part of, we did get, we're able to get Carbondale Community School Ross. I think that's it, to also participate, so that like the town of Carbondale could pull all their public school data together and look at it. And have kind of see and shoot to pull that, but yeah, so it's possible. It's possible.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see, just because in looking back, I think schools up Valley are significantly higher than the state averages, not in a positive way, and so I'm curious if like the level of socioeconomic status seems to be affecting rates, and if the SALT community is at a greater risk than some of the other communities, or if it's just totally separate from what school district is totally different. There are such distinct communities within our district, so I'm interested to know. Those were my only questions, so we'll move to 5 minutes of discussion, and we'll have anything else.
I guess the only other question, or a couple questions I had, is sort of like the same question in the high school and the middle school, and they were asking a little bit differently though. In the middle school, I mentioned that 1 in 6 students didn't feel safe going to school in the last month. Do we have any more like data about why that is? And then in the high school, it says that 42% of students have skipped at least 1 school day, which is considerably higher than the state averages. So I think those, and they're in the same categories and asked a little bit differently, I think. Do you have any insight into like what that 1 in 6 who felt unsafe, what unsafe meant?
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't dug into that, and we haven't yet dug into that, but you can't, like, the questions are, do you get to the granular level of like, do you feel safe walking to school? Do you feel safe when you're at school? Do you feel safe in your community outside of school? So we can we could narrow those a little bit. I mean, when it comes to like the suite of questions around bullying, it's as detailed as, you know, kind of the opener question would be, have you been bullied at school? If you say yes, they will then go, have you been bullied in the classroom, in the hallway, in the bathroom, in the cafeteria, on the playground? So that we can, like, I think if we were following that line of questioning, there's probably opportunities for us to narrow in and look at things like, kids are feeling unsafe at school, is obviously a bullying issue going on, and then you narrow that bullying and go, oh, wow, that's interesting, a lot of kids are talking about this stairwell. And that's what the kind of work that the schools will do with this,
And you say that that's something that you can share with us, is that something we can send out to the board? in the fall?
just
That's good.
let us know what you.
Like, let us, let
Yeah,
you know.
we feel like we want, like, because I think, I'm hearing there are stuff to do very more like school specific. So we have middle school and high school data, for each of our middle schools and high schools. And then we have district-wide data for like all the middle schools together, all the high schools together. That's all that we were really presenting on tonight. So we could, it's a massive set of files, like, let us know what you want.
So you have to share like files that,
Yeah.
files, it's not just like one thing that gets us there to look through.
No, it's not, it's tricky, yeah, it's kind of, it's,
Okay,
but we can do it, like, we can get it to you, just we need to know kind of way.
thank you.
Anything else?
One final wrap up and on the same track, I just want to say, I'm always intensely proud of the work that we're doing as a school district around understanding our students' experience in the classroom, not just academic achievement, identifying where we're struggling with mental health, and that we are taking a tremendous amount of ownership for that as a school district. To a point where that's almost unfair and unrealistic. We cannot solve it in a vacuum. And if we do not get the support of our counties and our towns, our community leaders, our community organizations, our institutions of faith around fundraising for what we need about solving these problems, maybe we lead, but I just deeply believe that it is unfair and unrealistic to pin this vast scope of issues, mental health, substance abuse, suicidality, sense of belonging on the school districts alone. I'm saying that to the people. So thank you for the soapbox.
100% for that. I think it's incumbent on all of us in this room and in our community, put that pressure on everyone to be supporting our kids. Thank you. At this time, we welcome members of the public who have signed up to address the board. There are 2 speakers signed up tonight. The board allows 45 minutes for public comment. To respect the time of all who are present, speakers are asked to limit their remarks to 3 minutes or less. Reminder to all speakers to uphold our procedures for public comment. We ask that you be thoughtful and constructive with your comments, and thank you in advance for sharing your feedback. Members of the public who wish to share their views with the board may always do so in writing at any time. For this evening's public comment, we received 2 written comments. Our first speaker tonight is Katya Gonzalez.
Yes, and I will focus on as an organizer. Voces Unidas de las Montañas strives to empower Latina and Latino leaders from the Central Mountain region to step into their power and fill positions of leadership within their communities. As a local and a woman who had the privilege of growing up in this valley, I believe our home deserves a district that provides quality education. As I sit here today, I understand we all know that our district is about 60% Latino. I know we all understand the severity of the issues present. In 2008, Superintendent Judy Tunstall spoke about closing the achievement gap in an article published by Aspen Times. Yet, in 2024, more than a decade later, we are still in the same boat, attempting to address the academic gap present in our schools. In the grades 3rd to 8th grade, only about 50% of Latino and Latina students read and write at grade level. That means that almost 85% of Latina and Latino students cannot read or write at grade level. While standardized testing isn't the only way to measure academic achievement, it has been something that we can refer to in order to get a sense of where the student's success is. Standardized testing is part of the college admissions process a student must undergo. In these exams, the SAT is included.
In 2024, for the SAT exam for English and writing, only 30% of Latino and Latina students in 11th grade scored at grade level. This hinders 70% of Latino and Latina students from being competitive candidates in pursuing a higher education. One day our students will be adults. They will be active members of our community and or other communities. Will they be functional members of society? Will they be prepared for life after K-12? Voces Unidas understands that the school district is a complex system. However, as a school district, we believe that student success should be in the forefront. We cannot lose sight of what is important, a quality education. We demand a public-facing communication that is shared with the community, exemplifying that the Board of Education, the superintendent, and the school district as a whole takes a pledge to begin to create plans that will eliminate the academic gap we see within our schools. The change we wish to see will not happen overnight. Voces Unidas is here to support the Roaring Fork School District as we embark in a time of change. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rosalba Tellez.
Directiva. Mi nombre es Rosalba Tellez. Vivo en León y soy dueña de un par de negocios en el valle. Soy médico graduado de México también. Además, soy una madre de un exalumno del distrito escolar y agradezco la oportunidad de dirigirme a ustedes. La intención de estar hoy aquí es la de reiterar mi preocupación de la continua negligencia con que se aborda la educación especial, particularmente el impacto negativo de la falta de un diagnóstico y el apoyo temprano en las personas con necesidades especiales. Cuando estos niños son diagnosticados a una edad temprana, pueden lograrse de personas perfectamente funcionales, pero cuando no son atendidos a tiempo, corren el riesgo de enfrentar una serie de dificultades adicionales como el aislamiento social, problemas emocionales y un mayor riesgo de fracaso escolar. En el caso de mi hijo, desde el 4º año fue detectado un comportamiento atípico, situación que fue ignorada completamente y mal manejada. Desafortunadamente, la historia de mi hijo terminó en tragedia, pero esto no debe ser la norma. Es fundamental que como sociedad nos sensibilicemos sobre la importancia de la detección temprana de cualquier neurodivergencia y el tratamiento y apoyo apropiado. Al hacerlo, no solo beneficiamos a los niños con necesidades especiales, sino también fortalecemos nuestro sistema escolar y nuestras comunidades. Hoy soy la voz de mi hijo, soy la voz de las madres desesperadas que no saben cómo acercarse a pedir ayuda. Soy la madre de las madres, soy la voz de las madres que tienen miedo y sobre todo soy la voz de la enorme cantidad de niños y jóvenes que son ignorados y olvidados en su lucha en su discapacidad. Y la discapacidad de un sistema escolar ignorante y apático. Agradezco su atención a este asunto crucial y espero que el criterio cambie, haciendo obligatorio de que cada niño que entra al programa de educación especial pueda ser diagnosticado inmediatamente y ayudado en sus verdaderas necesidades. Es la única forma que tenemos para respetar el derecho civil y humano a la salud y a la educación. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Rosalba Tellez. I live in Glen Springs. I own a couple of small businesses in the valley, and I'm a licensed physician in Mexico. In addition to being a mother of a former student of the school district, I appreciate the opportunity to address you. My intention in being here today is to reiterate my concern for the continued neglect of special education, particularly the negative impact of the lack of early diagnosis and support for those with special needs. When these children are diagnosed at an early age, they can become fully functional individuals, but when they're not cared for early, they risk facing a range of additional difficulties, such as social isolation, emotional problems, and an increased risk of school failure. In my son's case, since the fourth grade, atypical behavior was detected, a situation that was ignored and completely mishandled. Unfortunately, my son's story ended in tragedy, but this should not be the norm. It is essential that as a society, we raise awareness of the importance of early detection of any neurodivergent and appropriate treatment and support. In doing so, we not only benefit children with special needs, but we also strengthen our school system and our communities. Today, I am the voice of my son. I am the voice of desperate mothers who do not know how to approach for help. I am the voice of the mother who is afraid. And I am above all the voice for the vast majority of children and youth who are ignored and forgotten as they struggle with their disability and the disability of having an ignorant and apathetic school system. I appreciate your attention to this crucial issue, and I hope that change can happen to make it mandatory that every child who enters the special education program can be diagnosed and helped in their true needs. That is the only way to respect the civil and human right to health and education. Thank you.
Thank you. The next business in order is the approval of the consent agenda, which includes routine personnel, minutes from our 9/25 board meeting, and approval of policies GBGF, GBGG, GBI, GCE/GCF, GCO, GDE/GDF, ACA, and repeal of current policies GCE and GCF. Directors, are there any items that you would like to pull off the consent agenda for a separate discussion and vote? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I move that the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second? Can you please call vote?
Director Doctor. Director Cooper.
Aye.
Director DeFreitas.
Aye.
Director Tyler.
Aye.
Directors, you just approved the consent agenda. The next business in order is a district enrollment forecast presentation from Shannon Bingham from Western Demographics and Chief Bomba. After the presentation, each board member will have 2 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. Shannon Bingham. I have a company called Western Demographics. I provide demographics and school planning services to school districts all over Colorado and Western US. I was hired by the school district to conduct an update of our demographic data and do some other explorations associated with school capacity. And I've spent approximately 3 months becoming familiar with the district and trying to understand some of our enrollment dynamics. And I have a brief presentation I'd like to offer. My findings are that we will fundamentally remain level during the next 5 to 8 years, but we have a slight downtrend that we will be experiencing relative to our total enrollment. I've described it as level, but for the most part, during the next 5 years, we'll decline by approximately 150 students. Our current school facilities are adequate to address the needs that we have during that period. The land suitable for residential development in our 3 primary municipalities and other areas in our unincorporated areas that would be suitable for residential development is predominantly built out. So we are looking at a less stressful residential growth environment coming during the next 5 to 8 years. There's not really enough affordable housing being constructed in the valley to create an additional number of students that would stress our facilities significantly. So we believe that we are probably looking at a relatively stable enrollment situation. We may not need additional school sites, so the district has some flexibility in what it could do with some of the properties that it currently owns. Our facilities are easily in the top quartile of design and condition ratings I've worked for approximately 200 districts during the last 42 years. I work all over the state, and what I've seen here is amazing in its quality and design and maintenance and cleanliness. And we do a very good job providing spaces for children. We are also among the top 3 districts regarding the amount of affordable staff housing that we provide to our teachers and staff. And that's also to be commended because a lot of the districts in the state are looking to Roaring Fork and Eagle County where to understand how this is done. And we are certainly demonstrating how to do that to the state. Our birth rate is declining. You can see from data from the Colorado Department of Health that we have gone from about 600 births to about 370 in the district's geographic area since 2006. So that is part of a generational change from millennial and Generation Z young adults who are having smaller families. So as we continue to add new housing to the housing stock, and we add total population, the number of children coming to us through that normal channel has diminished. This graphic shows how that breaks out among our various elementary school attendance areas. The Basalt and Carbondale area have the most dramatic decline, with Crystal River and Basalt Elementary having the blue and rose colored bars on the top, or lines that are showing fewer births. Our total population has grown, so as that housing has been built, people in ages 0 through 85 plus have increased in population, so our population is growing. But we continue to be a district that has fewer children, as represented by the bars on the bottom of this bar graph. Fewer children in the ages 0 through 18 cohorts relative to adults in those other cohorts shown above. So our average child age cohort is 70% of what the adult cohort would normally be. We have probably 3,000 houses that are in the approval process through our various municipalities right now to be absorbed during the next 8 years. We estimate that we would get approximately 900 children from that housing, but that will offset this generational decline factor that we've identified in the existing housing stock, which is about 99% of total. And as that declines, it's offset by the new kids coming into the new housing. Around the district, we are building a lot more multifamily housing, but the municipalities are challenged by the ability to provide affordable property. And our school district is actually one of the leading affordable housing providers in the valley. As far as students that we export, we have students that continue to attend the charter school, Colorado Charter School Institute. Those are mostly at our Montessori school, and other students that leave us to go to Aspen School District or other adjacent school districts. We import a significant number of students from Garfield too, specifically at Two Rivers Charter, which we took on into our district management structure about 2 years ago. Our overall enrollment forecast is shown in this graphic, and here are the annual slight declines that I anticipate. But for the most part, we expect a relatively level enrollment picture, given all the other circumstances that are affecting us. A lot of our neighboring districts are declining rapidly. So our expectation is that we will continue to be relatively stable, at least for the next 5 years, and possibly slightly beyond that. I'd be delighted to respond to any questions that you have.
Thank you. We'll start with Director Tyler.
I appreciate this very thorough presentation. Those who are listening, we already had about an hour of this conversation earlier today, and so I believe during that time all my questions were answered. I really appreciate the thoroughness and how it's been presented. And actually, I will ask one question, and this is, I still had a question when we met earlier. It shows that like in the forecast for the coming years that elementary enrollment will be dropping, but middle school and high school enrollment are either staying steady or going up. And is that mostly because it's continued just to get a smaller amount coming through, and so the middle school and the high school are still catching up to those smaller enrollments? Is that the main reason why?
We have some large grades moving through the system. For example, there will be 478 fourth graders next year. And our kindergarten is 336. So we have that one big grade that will move through the middle school facilities. And so that's part of why there is some growth there. I'm looking for that history chart. I guess I don't have it in the slide deck, but for the most part, we have that big grade moving through, and that's the reason why middle and high school grows a little bit, remains stable, while elementary drops. And again, the births are correlated directly to the kindergarten enrollment 5 years later. So as we continue to decline from a kindergarten standpoint, that's going to affect K, and then it will affect 1, and then it will affect grade 2, then it will affect grade 3. And as that diminished raw material phases into the grade distribution, that's why the elementary enrollment is first to be affected.
Then I do have one more question. If you look at that 478 that you were talking about that's in fourth grade at the moment on this slide right here, if you look diagonally going down right from that, like so fifth grade the year after, sixth grade the year after, why are we jumping from like 478 to 482 to 514? Like, why would we jump 30 or 40 kids from fifth grade to sixth grade in that year?
Children come back to the neighborhood schools from our private and charter providers. So we have children that come back to us from our charter school, children that come back to us from our church school, and they rejoin to get ready for the high school experience. So even though a private or charter or church school may have a K-8 format, sometimes parents work with their children to transition in to a neighborhood school at the middle school level to get ready for the high school experience. So that's pretty standard behavior from families, that they are getting children ready for that high school experience. And they don't necessarily want that to happen suddenly and immediately in ninth grade. They want that to start, that transition to start in seventh and eighth.
That's interesting, makes sense. But also if you look at like starting on the same slide, like in kindergarten 2025, it shows that it increases until fourth grade, again, sort of like following that cohort. Why, like from first kindergarten through fourth grade, is there increases?
Well, that's the way as far as a kindergarten through fourth grade increase, we also have some housing growth that's coming to us at the elementary level. So even though we may start low because our inaugural year from the diminished birth rate was lower than the private year in kindergarten, we continue to add children through the elementary grades because we have those 3,000 housing units out there, adding kids back into the distribution. So we are getting some growth in housing, but we're adding it to a smaller grade size to begin with because we have fewer babies born. So we're adding water to the bucket as we go along, but the bucket is smaller.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Dr. After?
Great, thanks for this and for the deeper presentation during the work session. The on slide 10, it shows that we exported 660 students in school year 2024.
That's correct. That's the figure that the Colorado Department of Education had on their official books for the 23-24 school year, was that 660 number.
Got it. And for this year, we heard that in terms of the exports to Aspen, then it was going to be closer to 300 for the current school year.
That's correct, but that's unofficial. So
Yeah.
that was an estimate at their last board meeting as far as what their admission of foreign work students was. at the beginning of the school year, but that's not a Colorado Department of Education number, which is what you're seeing on this table.
And Chief Bombach, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the financial significance of exporting so many students to other districts for us. How does that path work? And what is the loss, the financial loss to our district?
Shannon might be at even better position than I,
Okay,
but
we're good.
essentially from per pupil funding, that would be the biggest impact.
So is it just the multiplying 60 times the per pupil funding number?
Yeah,
And that's
around
what we get.
$10,000.
So the amount that we're losing to ASPA this year would be 300,000.
And then we have the other side where we see how many students from other districts attend our districts, or the import number. It's fairly balanced right now. The charters going to other places and from other districts.
The Two Rivers students, they pull students from our district as well.
Correct.
Yeah, from our attendance zones. Okay, thanks. I don't have any other questions in addition to what we talked about earlier. So thanks so much.
Director DeFreeze?
Similar to everyone else, I appreciate the thoroughness of our previous discussion and appreciate the forward thinking that the chiefs are putting into financial and facility planning and looking at how these forecasts are going to impact that, trying to position ourselves to leverage the resources we have as best we can. So I appreciate that effort. And we see it. Thank you.
I just have a couple of questions. Obviously, our valley is unique and doesn't quite compare to a lot of other major cities and areas. I'm curious if you see increases in those birth years that you're talking about this year's third graders, next year's fourth graders, a massive class size, it's the biggest birth year. But are you seeing a direct correlation in housing developments to an increase in births? Or have you seen that when you're looking at the development of our communities?
Unfortunately, because of affordability, we're getting fewer children out of the housing that's being constructed in Colorado every year. So the price profile of the average home in the state has gone up rather dramatically. Interest rates have gone up rather dramatically. And so affordability has become a challenge, especially for our teachers and police and firemen, folks that need to be close by. So that's why institutionally supported affordable housing for staff is such an important step for especially school districts to take. But I am seeing fewer children coming out of housing because it's more expensive in relative terms when you explore other areas like Central and South Texas, Central Kansas, Southern Arizona, Southeastern Idaho, other areas where housing is a little bit more affordable. We're seeing a bit of a migration from young adults just beginning their family production years, if you will, looking at the opportunity to own a home elsewhere, whereas if they were to remain here and have a family, they would be renting. So a lot of those decisions, if they have flexibility in their careers, are being made, and the ultimate outcome is that they're deciding to go with us.
Yeah, and let me rephrase my question, and maybe you don't have this information, it's really valley specific, but when these big affordable housing projects come online, are you seeing a corresponding increase in birth rates? Because you see these anomaly birth years and they pop up, and I think
There's not enough of it to make a dent. So we're looking at in any given year, maybe 1% of the housing stock is new and 99% of it is existing. And so you can have a minor trend in the existing housing stock that's 99% of homes and compare that to a major trend in new housing. And typically the existing housing stock in that 99% of homes will overshadow what's happening with new and affordable housing. Another thing that happens with affordable housing is the population moves around within a geographic area, and people that may have been in a low quality apartment property would move into a very high quality, affordable new unit that would be provided by an institutional provider. And what we're seeing is sometimes people move around within the housing stock they're better off as far as like their dwelling, the nature of their dwelling. They're more likely to remain in the community because they have better circumstances. And in many cases, they're more likely to keep their family in that location because they have a better living situation, even if they're still renting.
Thank you. And then, I also appreciated the time and work session to answer a lot of questions that we had. One question or one comment that you made was about sharing strategies for increasing enrollment when we're talking about our schools that are losing enrollment to neighboring districts. And I'd love to hear some of your ideas.
Now,
Yeah.
I think that, feeder system marketing has been proven to be very effective in districts that are declining enrollment districts, especially if there's a competitiveness situation. So for example, in the Salt, the Longhorn Pride program, if that were to be shouted from the rooftops and that community were to truly own that ethic, I think that could have some positive outcomes. And I know that it is owned by a lot of people in that community, but there are certainly steps that could be made to make it even more pervasive, and that could also be implemented in other feeders that may have competitiveness issues. Course offerings, academic branding has been very effective in retaining students, but high quality course offerings are something that a lot of parents, especially those with high performing students, are looking for. CTE is incredibly popular among all students, and if you offer a student a CTE opportunity at the elementary level, and it's incredibly well tailored to their aptitude and their ability, they're very prone to remaining with you if they have the same opportunity in middle and high school. So if they have that kind of a matriculation opportunity for stranding from a curricular standpoint, those folks tend to remain. Those students are highly motivated and very excited about school, and they tend to stay. And then the branding aspect that I mentioned with the Longhorn Pride program, the SALT, that sort of activity has also been demonstrated, especially in several extremely large front range school districts, and being incredibly successful.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
We'll now have 5 minutes of open board discussion. If anyone else has any questions, comments.
I had another question for Chief Bonbaugh. On the, so I don't see it in the slides here, but in the, data we got earlier, there was discussion of some of the schools that in the next 5 years will potentially be, short some seats. And so, do you do anything about that now, or do you take a wait and see approach?
Yeah, so when we talk about short some seats, it's sort of, we have a historic method that we've used in the past for determining the capacity of the school, and it's pretty simple, really. It's, class size times number of classes, and then how much of the building we lose by subtracting teachers' planning periods and things like that. Shannon's working on updating that for one thing. So I'd say, well, let's wait and see on our new capacity determination for those schools. But then what we've been discussing, Shannon's walked every one of our schools with me in the past month, and there's room to do some kind of fairly minor renovations, the kind of thing we actually did at Enrollment Springs High School in the annex building this summer, where we renovated some office spaces and made classroom spaces. We added another classroom. We had one's under construction right now, actually at Bridges, and one just finished before school started at Roaring Fork. So we're kind of looking at underutilized spaces within the building, and it's been really comforting to me to walk with Shannon, and we found those spaces. So we're confident that within our existing footprints, we can accommodate those enrollments.
I guess just one more question. Are you taking this information that Shannon has presented to us, and especially about probably not having the need for additional schools and in this housing development plan that we're trying to put forward? I'm sure those are communicating, and especially as we talk about what we were thinking of school sites in the future, of how that could be developed.
Yeah, thanks, Director Tyler. That was one of the reasons for the timing of this was I'm actually having our kickoff meeting with our consultants on the staff housing master plan next week. And I want to have this conclusive data that really shows us that we are highly unlikely to need to build another school in this district in the foreseeable, even long-term future. And so that will be taken into account. One of the things that's part of the contract for the staff housing master plan is to analyze a couple of properties that we haven't analyzed for housing before. We did an analysis that led us to Meadowwood as the next project a few years ago. And now we're going to look at what's next and we'll consider all of our sites.
Thank you both very much. The next business in order is an update from our CFO, Chief Chicoine. And this will be a standing update for board meetings. Dr. Shirley, let's jump into questions and comments. We'll do the jump right in.
One thing I'd add is that I'm working on the cash flow currently, so I should have an update for you guys the next board meeting on that one, but other than that, I'll just jump into.
Great, thank you. We'll begin with you, Director.
I apologize, I don't think I realized that this was a Q&A session, so,
I can insert background.
okay, thank you.
Director Brady, too.
I think I was just interested maybe in, under the health insurance issue in the memo, you're working with the provider of Think Health in the district's current carrier and looking at getting a stop loss quote from them. And that may be able to take some of the current risk. Now, I was interested in maybe explain what that is looking like.
Thank you, and this is a consistently shifting issue. And we have reviewed that information and we haven't found any other options within Think Health that were going to really save the district the money we were hoping. So that's the update on that one. Initially what we were hopeful of is that perhaps there may be a way to negotiate with our current stop loss carrier or a different stop loss carrier to see if there was a more beneficial quote to take away some of the risk. Because our current stop loss maximum is around 10.7 million for 2024-25. And if there was a way to take that down to say 9.7 or something like that, that would actually help to lower our risk this year, but we were not able to do that. Good question.
I think I understood this. Could you just clarify stop loss one more time?
Ah, thank you. Yes, I'm getting used to working with this. I was starting to
Get to third, fourth grade level.
Absolutely. No, that's perfect. So what the stop loss does is that, looking at the total number of claims for the district, it stops the loss at that maximum. Okay, so that's what the insurance does. It says, okay, that after your claims go over the 10.7 million in total, then they cover those claims up to the next $1 million. Does that help?
Yes, and where are we falling?
Pretty close to the top. In the past year, actually, we went over that, actually, depending on how you calculate it, I guess. We went slightly under the amount for 2023-24, but very close to it. And we're estimating with our actuary currently what that would look like for this year. So he's still delving into those numbers for this year.
Thank you.
Dr. Taylor?
Just as a follow-up to Mr. Frady's, when we are talking about the stop loss, is it customary in the insurance business that you buy a $750,000 policy to give you coverage of stop loss for $1 million? Because that's what we did, correct? And that seems curious.
Well, I don't know the answer to that because I'm not an insurance person, okay?
That this is not my, I mean, I would love, for us to bring that question back when the actuary is going to be here for the next meeting. I think that would be a better question for him, just to make sure that we're answering that. And he's delving into those numbers right now. I would say that what is customary, however, with a self-insurance plan is to make sure you have that maximum. You know, the problem is that when you set it so high, I mean, so close, or excuse me, close to what you think the claims are, then the dollars, you know, the cost of that becomes a little higher. So it's this kind of catch-22 of making sure that your stop loss isn't too high, so your premiums don't skyrocket, you know, through the roof, while still mitigating your cost, if that makes sense, is my general understanding. As a layperson, so to speak, a CFO actuary is the term I like to use.
Also, I know when we had our meeting with, IDB recently, and then at our last board meeting, we had talked about annotating our, like, page 10 of the budget. Have you been able to do any kind of annotation of that to show where we are currently?
I have not done that yet, but that is on my list of things to do, and we will get that accomplished very soon, this week.
Okay, that'd be good.
I'm just gonna write myself a note, so thank you.
That's it, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So at the next board meeting on the 23rd, you will be bringing us a recommendation as to next steps on the health insurance. Is that right? And at that time, will that have been communicated to the stakeholders and your IDB, et cetera, or will we get your recommendation and then it'll be pushed out to the teachers and other stuff?
Yeah, Dr. Cole needs to chime in on this.
Yep.
Anna's been working very closely with those groups.
So and they've been phenomenal. Our plan is that by next Friday, in the board packet, which will be public, will be a memo that'll articulate our recommendation. We will share an email with staff, letting them know what that recommendation is going to look like, and then also the positions of classified, certified, and admin IBD on, so staff, we felt an obligation that staff gets that, before the public does. And so that'll come out to staff, on Thursday, now, and then it'll be in that, public. And then it'll await board action before we can formally to take the next steps, if we're taking next steps. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's a whole set of plans of domino pieces that will fall depending on what we end up doing. With that.
I have some questions around the ESSER closeout. I noticed that you utilized all the funds, which is excellent, because that's what I was hoping for. I'm curious about the $188,000 in indirect costs, and if those were used on something that the board hasn't seen before, or how that was utilized. Is that money that was spent within the last, or allocated within the last 30 days?
So when we were doing the closeout for the ESSER funding, we noted that back in 2021 was towards the beginning of the project, that there was roughly that number of expenditures that were reallocated to different grants. So we had to show those as expended. And it was too late to be able to re-spend those monies. So we were at risk of losing them unless we would have added that indirect cost right in there.
Okay. So it was just labeled as indirect cost.
That's right.
And then I'm not understanding the final sentence about the $422,000. With the supplemental grant exceeds the grant allocation in the system by $422,000. Does that mean that the grant that we received exceeds the allocation? No, by that amount, it means we're under by that amount.
We exceeded our expenditures by $422,000, meaning that that's gonna hit
somewhere, in our capital funds or in our general fund, and I'm still working, with our COO Ben on for that, to look at that information and then to see what the best, reallocation is for that and looking at where our numbers come out for 23-24 also.
So is that on the capital project?
Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was for the HVAC.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm very excited for the financial excellence initiative. I'm very grateful for the transparency that is being provided around our budgeting plan. And I would advocate for a piece of that initiative to also include some public facing or public engagement opportunities beyond just our internal teams ultimately. So we'll move to 5 minutes of open discussion. Yeah.
Could I just follow up on what you were saying, Director Bloomberg? So this $188,000 and the $422,000, are those monies that we need to find within our budget then? Or are those monies that have already been accounted for?
188,000 you can consider to be a wash, so that is not going to impact budget for 23-24 or our actual expenditures or how much we have available. The 422,000 is something that we still have to look at as we continue to close our books to see where we may be able to pull that funding from as an unspent budget funding. That's going to take a deeper dive, if that makes sense.
Not exactly. So like if we're talking about what we have for like, when we're talking about the health insurance, that we have monies beyond our allocated budget right now, that we need to pay for health insurance that are allocated reserves, is the right term? Unallocated reserves. Is this 422,000 gonna have to find places to get from unallocated reserves, or if we use it from our allocated reserves, are we just lower the amount of money then that we would have to find for the health insurance from unallocated?
The 422,000 is in addition to the health insurance issue. So that is, there's two different issues there. So I just want to make sure that that is noted, but we may be able to look at our, so the COO or myself, we need to look with our contractor maintenance to see what our capital projects fund looks like for this year. And where we may be able to pull funds for this year, and fund in projects that are budgeted for this year. Because then we may be able to lower our expenses in this year to make up for the higher costs last year. So that's what we're looking into. We don't know for sure whether or not we can do that. If we cannot do that, then we'd have to look at general unallocated reserves in our general fund, which we do not want to do because of the other issue with health insurance right now.
I have two other questions, but I don't want to take all time. One question is, so this was, we're saying was from HVAC repair that we did, or HVAC work. Why was that not like within a budget in the past? Like, why wasn't it budgeted in past budgets?
I don't know the reason, why that funding was, overspent, but it was clearly overspent.
Okay, and then my follow-up question, and this is a question that was asked again in IUB. So like, we found the Glenwood High School materials fund, we're finding this $422,000 for HVAC. We had a couple others. Do you feel like you have now discovered all of these discrepancies that have been in the past, or do we think they'll continue to be like these types of amounts continuing onward?
So my hope is that we found everything, but because of the health insurance issues and some of these things we're uncovering, it's taken an inordinate amount of time to work through those. So I have not had the chance to fully review our 2024-25 budget for this year. Because what I'm planning to do is get a full summary of that budget by each one of our administrative units and by each one of our locations to assure that everything is budgeted and go to that level of detail for our budget, which is something that I'm gonna need to work on over the next month. And also close out the books for 2023-24. So there's still those two large, I guess, boulders I would call in front of me before I'm gonna be able to say without question that there isn't anything else out there. And we understand, and this is something that we talked about, you know, pretty succinctly also with the IBB folks is that we know the timelines, I mean, these are really tight and we need to look at this and do the work as fast as we can. And I can tell you that our finance team is feeling that pressure. But I'm trying to still keep the positivity amongst the team while moving forward as fastly. Oh my goodness. That is as quickly as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief Chicoine. I appreciate all your work and keeping us up to date.
Absolutely.
One short
Yeah,
question.
and this is kind of practical. Have you gotten enough staff questions about insurance? Are people aware that this is the time to teach that there's a window?
You know, I think that, our staff it's been impressive to the thoughtfulness, the questions, the engagement, that staff have demonstrated in leaning in. And I think that my sense is that folks understand the complexity of the dilemma in front of us. And I think that there are, you know, when we've laid out kind of phase one decision-making is stay or go. Phase two is how we pay for it. Phase three is what do we do in 25, 26? Because we know we're gonna see an increase of whatever we're able to cover for the current situation. And so I think that, folks are aware and engaged and also tracking and know that there are many conversations to come, that I think different folks have maybe a different interest in the phase two and phase three decision-making processes. I think one of our assessments, and we have hosted 2 virtual frequent Q&A sessions with Chief Chicoine and I in the last week, and had very small, minute participation of about 2 staff members each of those meetings. And I think that's, for us, it was they were wonderful conversations. It was a wonderful opportunity to answer really specific questions. It also was data to us that maybe folks are feeling like a little saturated with opportunities at this point. I know a lot of conversations are happening in all of our workplaces and sites around this, and I think folks are going to stay connected to the work. So I don't know if enough. I think I have been grateful for the complexity that staff understand that we're dealing with. And I think some of the things that we've heard as our IBB leadership teams are trying to achieve a position statement is frustration that we share, understanding that we can't answer all the questions that staff really want answered. And our leadership teams know why we can't. And so that I think folks have come along with us as far as we can go. And so I actually feel like we've learned a lot about process and staff engagement through this. And, you know, we've pivoted some of the processes that we've taken in the last 3 or 4 weeks of this work because of feedback and pushes of do it this way, push out information this way, and we followed that guidance. And so I don't know if it's enough, but I feel like we're at a good place, that people know where we are, what to expect. They're ready for phase 2 and ready to come with us and keep working.
This, I mean, is a general statement. I feel as though if we get to the end of this, maybe second phase, maybe third, I don't know. No staff member should be surprised next year. Absolutely. I know it's not, we can't make everybody read their emails. We cannot make everybody engage. Can't even get certain board directors to turn in financial statements that we've been asked about 3 times. I understand that. But I'm saying we have to do everything we can to get the word out there so that there is a trust built. And I think intentionally working that into whichever stage you feel is most appropriate as superintendent to say, this is when it is in your face, you have to read it and do it again. We're going to mention the meeting. I really don't want to see staff surprised.
I really appreciate that, Director Frady's, and in fact, that is one of the first things that certified IBD said to us, was like, you administration have to kind of like force some of this on people. And so that the certified recommendation was for us to basically co-opt 15 minutes of this district ERW last Wednesday, where it was great that Assistant Superintendent Park, this was one of the district ERWs, and so we could quickly kind of say, yeah, we're gonna require everybody at 3:45 to stop and tune in. And I just kind of made a statement that was a 10, 15-minute overview of where we were with that exact intention, because that we heard that very clearly from certified. Like, okay, there's plenty of people that are like, I don't really care about health insurance, and I don't really care where they find the money. But it was really important to them to say, but people are going to care the impact on raises, the impact on premium contributions, and that cannot be a surprise for people. And so that was a push. That was a different strategy for communication than we had used before, and wasn't part of the initial plan. We did it, and I think it's not great news to share, but I think that was the intent. Was we don't want you to be surprised at where this takes us.
Can I add to that too? One thing that we heard from IBB is that we really want to know about financial issues and situations as they arise. We heard that from the finance committee. We heard that from the board, from a lot of our stakeholders, and this is why we're doing the CFO updates. We have made sure that the IBB groups understand that I'm doing the CFO update and have made sure that they watch these as well so that they stay informed also and can ask questions along the way. Because really there's two things that people need to stay informed on this. Number one is this health insurance issue, that nobody should be surprised about this. But then the second thing is that we've got other financial issues that we're trying to work through. And, I just want to make sure that people have that information and feel that they can get that information as we're moving forward as a team, because we're doing great things as a finance team and we're moving things forward as best as we can. And we've got good information that's coming out, even though it isn't everything that everybody wants yet, it's going to get there, and I think that is a big part of also building the trust with the board and also with the IBB teams is making sure that we're providing that financial information. At even a greater extent than we usually would. I would appreciate the updates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
The next business in order is discussion on first read policies EAC, EGAEA, GBEA, GBEC, GBCD, and regulation EEAEAA-R, and second read of policy GBJ. Board member will have 2 minutes to share comments or ask questions. If you need additional time, just.
This is quite a complex. Okay, these are gonna seem to to you, but it's the order in which I read the policies and wrote down my questions. Okay. EGAEA, the public electronic mail records. Just a note that it seemed like there were still quite a few things that needed to be worked out on this one. I didn't know if this was, like there was a comment in here, that we're still seeking some, guidance from the legal counsel on this one. So I guess will we get that, will this be cleaned up and, at some point in the next few meetings for us to approve, like, answers to these good questions here?
Yes, correct. Yeah, we are still waiting on some recommendations from our tech director to say, you know, like, if this isn't possible, what is, and how is that? So, yeah, we're still waiting on that, and I would say if we don't pick that up by second, we can push back.
Okay. GEs, this is the alcohol and drug free workplace. Director Bloomberg had some big questions that I share. And then one question I have is, it says that the district the superintendent will establish an awareness and prevention program to inform employees about the dangers of drug and alcohol use, et cetera. Is that our job? So do you all have to do that, or you have to really do a program to inform the staff about the dangers of drug and alcohol use? Is that legal requirement?
Section of this portion has been added to the handbook that is published on the website. Actually, the updated section will be available tomorrow. And this awareness program includes truly just a few lines on what the abuse of drugs can do, on the resources available. So it's not
really a program. I think of a program as like
about something very extensive.
Yeah.
I see.
Okay, just a flag that language is weird. It was weird to me as a reader if you're not pushing out some kind of program.
Understandable. Thank you for that.
And I'm not suggesting that you need to do that. It's just a tweak of language. And then if the board has to review it every 3 years, then it should be added to the board tracker.
I think we like that in policy committee, and she blended to that.
Yeah, great. Sorry. Okay, EPAAR. This is the one about bus drivers and drugs. What happens when are teachers randomly drug tested? What if but bus drivers can be randomly drug tested?
Bus drivers,
can
yes.
Do teachers drive buses?
Yes, so, and in their category of bus driver, they could be tested.
Okay, and then, does, marijuana,
Okay, go ahead.
does marijuana is now legal in Colorado, or teachers allowed to consume marijuana in their free time, and also drive buses? It seems strange to me because you might have someone who legally consumes marijuana in their free time, right? And then they get randomly drug tested because they're an occasional bus driver.
I think that we defer, and I'm trying to figure out where it is, that we defer to federal law.
It's in the GDC.
So, yes, if you were randomly drug tested, you're using marijuana in the state of Colorado, and you're a bus driver. This would apply, like, the steps and the disciplinary practices would apply to you. Is it right? Is it policy that marijuana is considered not lawful for us? Somebody would be straight and positive for it. If you look at the definition of illicit drugs in GDC, fell within that definition, like if they didn't have prescription, like prescribed or sold. So I think like if you're talking medicinal marijuana and there's a prescription, that it could fall outside the scope of illicit drugs. I think recreationally, it would fall within our definition of an illicit drug.
And has the RCEA reviewed this?
They have reviewed this suite of policies that will comment.
It seems like something that you would want to know if they are. You might want to push that out to them to make sure that they're aware that these legal recreational marijuana. BBGB, this is the one about staff about the purpose of this policy, because
We all were in the committee.
it seems like such a narrow situation, but the title is so broad. I guess that's my commentary on that. I don't understand the purpose of this. It seems very important to commit a board policy to staff security and safety, and to me, this policy doesn't really do it.
I hear you, this was, we talked about this in policy. I mean, I think that the interest we have in making sure that this policy exists is that, and this is hard to talk about children hurting the adults in the building. That's what this is about. This is a protection for staff when kids hurt them physically. And it's meant to say there is an explicit policy to protect teachers from behaviors of students that are, assault, disorderly conduct, false allegations, that a student might make against a teacher. And so it's really about ensuring that our schools are safe for staff as well, and that we will have dedicated processes to protect staff. Yeah. I don't know if that helps, but that's the interest around.
So that's what I assume. Maybe just clarify the title. And the other thing that was interesting to me was toward the bottom, where it says the principal or principal designee will communicate discipline information concerning any student enrolled in the school, to any teacher who has direct contact with the student in the classroom. Is that standard practice?
So I pulled the statute during policy committee, and this is directly out of the state statute, and so we don't have any wiggle room on this language. This is what is required by state statute. Because it's like the same thing, but that didn't sit right with me.
Sounds like a draft or something of the policy.
Okay, okay, one more question. On GBJ, and I realize this is the back. What, if anything, can be redacted from personnel records that are approved in section 4?
So any personally identifiable information can be redacted, and that is typically what we have seen when these sorts of requests have come in before, because they don't come in often, and we're a little nervous about this. We've actually had legal review every request for this sort of information and do the redaction for us until we get more confident. And what we have seen is that what they're redacting is what we would consider personally identifiable information. And that's defined. Okay. This is policy we had. Was 1%.
And then the performance ratings, except for evaluations, like, so people can request performance ratings, except for the evaluations.
So I think they can receive the final performance rating, but they can't get the detailed evaluation content until this is superintendent clerk to make sure I said that correctly. That's my read of that they can find out, find the summary. But not the comprehensive content of the feedback. Just time cursor.
Nice to get on number 5 also.
Yeah, so number 5 is plans is confidential and only available to those permitted access to the state law. I mean, there's. Interesting that, I mean, maybe we dig into that one a little more, because I'm not that sure what criteria we would share. That's
Right. So I think actually there's a mistake in additional redaction or cross out there, because D is performance ratings scales. but not take evaluations is, I think scales was mistakenly also redline. Because the scales, yes, are, we can see what the. But the actual evaluation reports for the ratings are not.
That would make sense. We'll confirm that.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Director DeFreeze?
I only had one kind of question on GEC. In the crossed out version, Chief Landon mentioned significantly different. Some of the district's wording is significantly different. Like clearly formal district wording. And there's lines, employees arrested or convicted of any kind of possession of drugs or any kind of influence or controlled substance. The employee shall be suspended immediately pending investigation. And we've taken that out completely. Which I'm not against necessarily, I just was interested that that's a fairly large change where it used to be that if they were arrested at any time for possession, they would be suspended immediately and then not doing that. Is that correct? So then arrest records and police action outside of working conditions are not relevant to their employment.
There are certain arrest records that absolutely, by state statute, need to like immediate. But drug alcohol, like there are other, there are child abuse, spending things, yeah, substances.
If they're subject to disciplinary action, which may include suspension, termination, of the political constitution. What is that? That's one way. It's.
Yeah, I tried to highlight it.
I think the language is more may instead of will.
Will subject them to appropriate disciplinary action, but it doesn't indicate exactly what the disciplinary action is. So there's more premature about the option part of it. Dr. Tyler?
I had two questions. The first one is, EEAR, and the same thing that Director After was bringing up. I still have the question on marijuana too. And I recognize that it says it's an illicit drug is defined, but within the illicit drug is defined, alcohol is like in the same place as that, but you can use alcohol when you're off on your weekend. Whereas if you use marijuana when you're off on your weekend and it stays in your system for up to a week or whatever that is, it just seems like it could come to a sticky situation depending on how that is, and until maybe a better marijuana test is developed. Until when was it in one system? I just feel like that's a pretty nebulous. And if we're just saying as a bus driver, you can be tested with your marijuana in your system and then you're out, like, and if that's what this is saying, I think somehow we need to be more explicit about that. Something that is saying that a bus driver, you cannot use this legal substance because it can last in your system. And maybe it says that, but I think it should be said in more no uncertain terms.
Yeah, I mean, I would just name that when I first saw this, this is massive and overall, and when we consulted with the transportation department, they're like, yeah, we do this, we do all this training, we do all this communication, all of us started to know this is nothing new. And so I do feel pretty confident that the communication with our drivers, they understand these expectations, they understand the consequences. So I mean, it's, you know, this is a big part of their onboarding training.
Okay.
So I do feel, you know, we're very confident, like, oh, we got all this is very confident, pretty, kind of, you know.
And how often are these drug tests for drivers given? And how random are they? And my only other one was on GBGB, we talked about also, and the offenses against school employees in number 1. I'm curious about where it says the teacher employee will file a written complaint with the building principal, the superintendent, and the Board of Education. So are they gonna be doing like all 3 of those, and then talk about if they file it with the principal, how then, but like, that seems like, is that known, if somebody's filing, and understand that when they file, they're gonna need to file for all those 3 people, and they're gonna, or should those be ors instead of and?
That's a great question. The local complaint policy here that has an order, and the complaint goes first to your supervisor. And then goes to the person involved, and then it goes to superintendent or board.
So maybe just rewritten or reworded then or something.
Let us make sure that statute doesn't require that the board is notified every time it happens, like that would be my one concern.
Okay.
And then let us clarify whether statute requires. That may go back to if you want to know. But you might say, we actually want to know every time. And then I mean,
But even if you're including it, it seems interesting that it's put upon the teacher or employee to do that. Like, especially if it seems like this would be a situation that'd be pretty emotional, taxing part of the employee. I think now they're gonna have to duplicate to these other people. I don't know.
let's, I appreciate that concern. Let us find out to what extent statute requires this, and if it is required by statute, that the superintendent board has notified it to be by the employee. If not, let's take into consideration that we have some leeway. I agree with you. Would prefer to see something like the
Statutes as such, school teacher, school employee shall file a complaint with the school administration and the Board of Education. So it doesn't include superintendent, but it includes school administration and the Board of Education.
It requires the employee to do it.
Such school teacher or school employee.
Thank you.
It's a very robust statute.
That was just quick.
I have been trained on how to search statute. Anything else, Dr. Taylor?
Yes, thank you.
My only outstanding questions were around staff discipline, ensuring we think through how the discipline mentioned in these sections interacts with the CDC. And specifically, the board to know, my question was around drug violations, and the CDC trumps all of our internal policies, and when we revisit that in the future, is this one of those policies where we don't want it to trump, but we don't want it to go through the disciplinary process? If there's a drug violation, do we pull that out? The disciplinary. Like, how do you feel about? With. Yes, he's right here, the CDC trumps, this is why, this is the discipline process that will be followed. For other employee groups, it's not, this is not, and this is the discipline process that will be followed.
It sounds like we need to confirm that these would be distinct with the CDC. We confirm that these are distinct, or that no, this would be included in the CDC, and if so, what I'm hearing to be saying is that we should, we did this in a different policy where we have a sentence that says, when it comes to certified employees, go CDC.
Yes. Yeah, and the CDC will trump these policies, it's one of them. Just like I said, I think for the drug and alcohol abuse, for GBC, either for this board or a future board, when they're considering reapproval of the CDC, I think that should just be flagged as, does the board feel confident in pushing through the disciplinary process in the way that it's written in the CDC for certified employees, or because it's drug and alcohol violations, do they want it to be the same for all employees? I think that's valid question, whether it's this board or a different board who considers that. I think it should be flagged. That's all I have. Anything else on large swath of policies? No. Thank you. The next was in order of board updates and appreciations.
Okay, first of all, as appreciations, I would like to give appreciation to the district and schools in general for us going towards a position of dean of culture. I just feel like it's been super important as we keep talking about behaviors and the policies that we just talked about. They have another step in the school of who can help in those situations, make it restorative. And I just think that's been really important for the well-being of principals that we've had and taking off of their plate what would normally have been going to them and allowing them to do their job as principal more effectively. And so I just think that's a really important step that we have made of having those deans of culture and especially in light of a couple of things that we've discussed tonight, such as the Healthy Kids Survey, which is talking about all these mental health needs that is a person who's the key point person for that in these schools. And so I think that's super important. And then looking at like GDTV, where it's the safety of the staff and looking at how there are principals who come with scratch marks on bite marks. And so I just think it's important that we have this next step of trying to solve some of these issues prior to getting to that point and handling those duties of the principals. So I just want to appreciate that. Some updates on the housing committee. As I talked about last time, we're sort of putting off of where it is that we're trying to develop housing until we get that housing master plan in place. But what has been decided, not decided, being discussed and is continuing to be discussed is how does rent get decided? There's sort of some different camps of we want to keep rent as low as possible to make that a staff benefit and to really help retain our staff and make them feel good about being here. On the other hand, are we using some of that money to replenish housing? And so there's been a robust discussion about what is the right rent, comparing that with Asha, no, I'm not saying either of them. Asha. And we are lower rated than that. We have like a lower rate than Asha has, but what is that right rate? Well, that's something that's going to be open for future discussions. If you have information to give on that, because part of what our role is there is to bring it back to the board so there's no surprises when we get there. And then just had a meeting today with BOCES, and BOCES is in the need of hiring a new executive director. That's Ken Happenstall is stepping down at the end of this year, and the board just decided today to hire the firm of McPherson Jacobson for helping find the next executive director. So that went out today, and so we will be in contract with McPherson Jacobson to help us to work ahead of looking for that position to see what the community want and the different schools need to make that position the best that we do.
Thank you, Dr. Ashton.
Great, thanks. Yes, we've had a busy couple days. Here yesterday, we had a great school visit at Riverview. I want to call out in particular because of the structure that they used for sharing information with the executive team and myself. They had a student and parent panel. And the staff were there as well, but it's really fun to hear about the school experience, teachers, students, and parents without code. creating a lot of work for the school, or creating 1% in the version. There's an effective way to communicate. And I had a great meeting today with, the new, principal at CCS, and appreciated the time that, he is on this colleague gave to us. And for us from school, and had a great transparent conversation with them. Also went to a CTE advisory task force meeting yesterday. And so, just wanted to hear about the work and partners. And then just like, calendars. Oh.
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't have a lot of updates right now, but I have appreciation for, the local parents in Silverton Elementary School who helped put together a fund run, which is a crucial part of fundraising, for that school particularly, and, it being such a small school and being sort of like not FTE short, but it kind of had to make some cuts in the last few years. They just do a really good job bringing in a lot of community support and awareness to work being done at school. So, appreciate them.
Thank you.
And one more before you both establish the gavel.
Sure.
I would just like to appreciate Chief Chicoine for coming into the position that you're in. Facing a lot of difficult questions from us, from IDB, from different places, but coming in with a wealth of knowledge and from looking with detail and a fine-tooth comb through the budget. So thank you for bringing that excellence to us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
For updates, I am working on the enrollment task force, parent district supported push for basalt enrollment, because as we all saw this evening, basalt is getting hit hard with enrollment right now. The group has met once and built out a multi-tiered and multi-phased approach. We're currently seeking funding so that we can get professional PR support to help with this, because I think we believe that PR is a crucial part of this push. And so that's taken up a lot of my time. We have really dedicated community members, employees at all three schools, parents, staff, you know, a lot of people that are really dedicated to this effort. And so I've been grateful to work with them and ideas and get things rolling. Next week is homecoming week, and we're already gonna push for some media coverage of homecoming week. And our parade, celebrating some of the great things that are happening in Basalt. Doing the first homecoming parade down the new streetscape. So that will be great. And then for appreciations, I wanted to specifically thank Sarah Dogby and Brian Snow, who are keeping the DAC rolling as it is reiterating itself and transforming into its next phase. They've stepped up to be interim co-chairs now to keep that going. So wanted to call that out, and then also specifically thank the Basalt Education Foundation. I was about to miss the foundation's last meeting, but they're gearing up for their major fundraiser, Taste of Basalt. And so just greatly appreciative for all of the parent volunteer hours and work that goes into all of those events. They're crucial in funding paid positions within our schools, all of our outdoor education, and a number of other things with Basalt. So wanted to give a shout out to them. And now there is no further business, no objection. The meeting will be adjourned at 8:32 p.m.